Okay, so this is the topics I'm going to discuss today. First, I'll go over a short history of our ecosystem or of our company, or really the stuff I care about. Uh, I'm also going to talk about our transition to a microservice architecture, like a lot of companies are doing. Um, and I'll discuss some of the growing pains we've been having as we've been from a startup to a mid-sized company to a larger mid-sized company. Um, I'm also going to talk about the web platform experiment, which was a team where we offloaded some of our more mature services to a single management. Then we'll talk about the SRE initiative that we have planned for this year. So just a disclaimer, anything I say today doesn't necessarily reflect the views of RetailMeNot or the RetailMeNot engineering organization. A lot of this is my own opinions, and so they're probably not right. So a short history of RetailMeNot. 2006, Whale Shark Media was founded. This was our original company. 2010, Whale Shark Media acquires RetailMeNot. It was based in Australia. Like two guys founded it, or I'm not too sure about the history of that. 2013, our company rebrands itself as RetailMeNot, and we go public. 2016, I joined RetailMeNot. Very important. Early 2017, the company reorganizes our planning structure around OKRs and plan initiatives, which is very important, I think. 2017, we start the web platform team, and standardization efforts are started, and we're also acquired by another company. So we go private. Late 2017, standardization effort has been rebranded as developer experience, which I'll get into a little bit later. And this year, 2018, SRE team was born. So I'd like to talk about our transition to microservice architecture and some of the problems or challenges we face with that. So the RetailMeNot website was originally a PHP monolith. So it looks like on the surface just a coupon website, but look into it a little bit further, it's much more complicated than that. A lot of moving pieces. The UI backend, middleware, data, API, all lived in this monolith. So we've made an effort throughout the years to break it out of the monolith. Functionality of the monolith are split out into separate services. Your functionalities equal services. There's a natural relationship between team and feature groups. It makes it easier to maintain, deploy, iterate on. We have around 150 different engineering systems around that number. Around 400 active Git Bash repositories. So we have a large code base. So the operation side, like who's in charge and how it's organized. Traditionally, we have a DevOps team, but they're more of a consultant, kind of like a team where you offload your application on, and they're in charge of making sure it runs. The DevOps group manages shared services and utilities directly. They manage our AWS accounts and different security, like lower level stuff like that. They also develop tools to make operations easy for them and us. So the operation side of a service was traditionally left up to the application team that was developing a certain service. So a team had full control over from the application development to deploying and running the service. So I think the idea behind that was to give more power to the engineers. They have more control over the full spectrum. Then there's also the operational duty of the legacy or the core stack. That has always remained a very daunting task. It's gotten better over the years, but it's still quite a lot to deal with. And some of the growing pains we've had from moving from a startup to a mid-sized company to a bigger mid-sized company, the PSOD duties for the core stack or the legacy stack has still been a bit of a challenge. It's quite a while to actually build some of our core infrastructure, core application, test it, deploy it. Something I've been noticing is that since the application team is in charge of the operational, there's this constant balancing between feature development and improving the operation side of it. Usually, the feature development takes precedent over improving your operation, improving infrastructure. Another growing pain I've noticed is there's no standardization on some of the infrastructure or operational tasks. Logging, structure code, deployment models, Git branching, all that stuff, mostly left up to the individual working on the projects. Good ideas and latest standards that are developed by different engineers, they've been largely disseminated throughout the organization through word of mouth or through just conversating with different engineers. Infrastructure code was largely copy and pasted throughout the different code bases. Generally, it's like engineers are overburdened with PSOD tasks. They're dealing more with putting out fires or deploying applications than they would be from just doing straight up feature work. And we also have matured services that no longer have maybe we're no longer investing time and resource into improving or expanding on the feature sets. They're kind of in a weird pseudo orphan state, as in they have semi-owners those projects. There's no set teams working on them. They relied on like just I guess superheroes to maintain deploy them. They're just expected to work forever usually. They have some monitoring or they do have some monitoring, but the monitoring goes usually nowhere or to the engineer. And we also tend to collect metrics like the basic AWS metrics, latency, 4xF codes, all that stuff. But they tend to be collected for the sake of being collected rather than for actual use or monitoring. There's definitely we never had the idea of setting an SLI or SLO between our stakeholders, whether it's an external service or internal service, which makes it very hard to actually measure these services and try to define which parts of the service needs to be like constantly on or which should pay right. Like for example, if latency is on a certain endpoint, does it actually affect the end user? Should I be woken up in the middle of the night with a pain? Usually, there's a lot of useless pain in the world. Or like you don't know, is it my service that's misbehaving, or is it an upstream or downstream service that's misbehaving? It's kind of really hard to figure that out, especially in like a microservice world. We also had like many companies outdated documentation. Part of, in my opinion, part of the fix for that would be that documentation lives in the code along with the code, and it's deployed along with the code. So we're making a lot of efforts to fix all this. And also like there's a lot of tribal knowledge amongst different squads and teams that it's kind of hard to like bring out. So to deal with the growing operational overhead at RetailMeNot, we formed the web platform team. Some of the more mature services, which weren't getting heavy development on, that they were mostly feature complete, they were handed off to this one team. They had around 20 plus services to manage with about 6 engineers, and I was on that team. And yeah, why? Operational efficiency goes faster development. There's been and finally having an explicit owner for these services instead of individual like superstars that would maintain them ad hoc. We want to reduce risk through infrastructure modernization, whether that's security risk or just knowing whether your code can deploy on your infrastructure. And we also had the idea that operational duties can't take a backseat to feature development. Some of these problems, whether it's updating the architecture, updating libraries, they have to be done. And around 2017, when the web platform team was founded, we had a major initiative to improve standardization across the company, improve security across the company, and this was one of the teams to execute on that idea. And so the way the team was structured was that you had 6 engineers. Each engineer owned one primary service, and they were a secondary owner to another service. Um, there were 2 main PSOT groups, so like groups that would pay on. We would try to split up the 20 services into the 2 groups. The PSOT rotation, well, the idea was that through this PSOT rotation, even if you weren't a primary owner of a service, you would learn about the service through this PSOT group. And also, the expectation was the engineer that was the primary owner for a service was expected to become the subject matter expert of the service. So what do we learn? If you do this, you're gonna have a bad time. So here's some of the troubles we've had. Handing over a large number of services to one team is not a good idea. There's just too much to do. Especially when the team and each member is in charge of the application and operational task of the projects. We've had the same issue of like the existing feature work, or do we improve the infrastructure or operational side of it? And again, the operational side or the infrastructure side always took a back seat, and they're a siloing of each of the engineers on the team. You focus most of your time on your primary service. Knowledge wasn't easily disseminated to the rest of the team because why would it? You're focused on your service. You want to bring your service up to date. There was also overloading of work, obviously. There were ad hoc feature requests, even though these services weren't expected to be expected to have major feature development. It pops up every now and then. The business needs arise, so you gotta improve. You gotta add a new endpoint to your service, or you gotta change how certain service works. So yeah, that didn't go so well. So we formed the SRE team this year, try to mitigate some of the problems we had with the web platform team. So this is our mission statement of the SRE team. Our mission, oh God, our mission is to enable maximum change velocity for all services at RMN while maintaining high SLA attainment and embracing suitable risk. We directly through engineering, automation, and development of low friction processes, as well as indirectly by communicating with educating and assisting other teams. Basically, we just want to go faster. So just started forming this team. We're still debating on how this team should be structured, but here's what we have so far. Application development of those mature services that I talked about previously is still owned by the web platform team, which is as Lotus. SRE is only in charge of operational duties of those services and also creating new tooling and standards that'll ease up operational tasks. The goal of SRE is to sublinearly onboard more services while we make the number of engineers through whether it's through automation or better tooling or more efficient processes. Our current team size is 4 engineers. We're expected to have 2 more and another 3 sometime in the future. Yeah, this is very new. We're constantly changing things up, and yeah, it's really new. So this is kind of our lane of work. We try to divide up what type of work the SRE team would work on by innovation. We don't know how to do anything, so we're trying to figure out how to do stuff, whether it's implementing something like Prometheus, Terraform, or any other new fancy toolings that's out there. After we do innovation, we drafted up a proposal on how to implement it across the company. We actually go and implement it across the company, which is just like traditional PSOD work, and also we have our own PSOD definition, which I'll go over in the next slide. And we're experimenting with this liaison program, which means add an SRE team member onto another team and try to ease up their life, pretty much. we define peace out work as the following: firefighting, which is responding to alerts, mitigating outages, writing postmortems, and it's mostly reactive work. This other one is housekeeping, which is improving the peace out process, updating documentation, and implementing new standards across lesser, higher priority services. Let's see. So let me get that below. For the innovation work, what's important here is that we're researching how to use new, but during the research, one of the most important things to us is that it's easily reusable by other teams. That's because we're not going to, our goal isn't just to jump onto another team's project and just redo everything. We want to give other teams the tooling and leverage to make their applications quieter, more easily measurable, all that good stuff. Initiative work, it's based, as I said before, it's based on the research we do before in the innovation work. We also keep in mind that we gather metrics that we need to show that whatever we are implementing is providing business value. So from the ground up, we have to think about that. So the two levels on the bottom of the slide, we have in our rotation for pager duty. We have level 1, which is the main engineer, expected to field all those outages, reactive work, do deployments of the service we manage. Level 2 is expected to support that level 1 engineer, still work on the other tasks. And there's also a bi-weekly peace out meeting we have. Every 2 weeks, we come together, review all the peace out outages or alarms or alerts that's gone off. We review what went well, what did we do, how do we improve it, and we kick it out, work to improve that process. So peace out is production support on duty, which means you're responsible for making sure your application runs. We're playing around with this concept called the SRE Liaison Program. It's largely experimental. What the SRE Liaison Program is that this gives opportunity for product development squads to recover from operational overhead. We're taking away a large chunk of that time that we invest in like with releasing, deploying, responding to alerts. We're taking that duty away from them. This is also a good chance to share best practices with them, maybe disseminate like the ideas that SRE is forming with other product teams. We're trying to increase developer ergonomics and efficiency. We're trying to prevent like heavily developed systems from falling behind in tech debt. And what the SRE Liaison Program is not, though, is that we're not additional capacity for these product teams. They can't just dump tech debt onto us and just try to fit in more feature work in their sprint. We're not a catch-all bucket for all security or tech debt work, and we're not going to do all their disaster recovery work for them. That's still expected on the team to do it. And some of the potential SRE liaison areas are we're identifying bottlenecks within their processes. We're trying to streamline the management process. We're working on improving CI/CD. We're working on building on a CI/CD pipeline. We want to start defining SLIs and SLO. Stuff like system health dashboards, standardized monitoring, alerting, logging, and infrastructure modernizations and best practices. So we have this another process for onboarding projects for our team. It's an explicitly documented list of things that they must define before they can offload a project onto us. Some of this is a list of things that they have to like let us know, stuff they should be documenting anyways. This should be spurring discussions between the SRE squad and the team that's offloading a project onto us. Throughout the process of onboarding a project onto us, we'll have this conversation on, hey, you need to fix certain things. Hey, your system's too noisy. You should probably look into that. Hey, you need to vault rotation or something like that. Um, so, and by having this set list, we're trying to ensure that the transition process doesn't drag on forever. It's timely and it's non-disruptive. They know what they have to provide to us beforehand. And of course, there's always going to be certain leeway given a project. Maybe fine if they don't meet certain criteria, or and we can do like these trade-offs between like different things. So some of the like the topics that we have in this transition checklist is infrastructure, like just what the infrastructure is like, the pipeline, with the deployment build process pipeline, the level of documentation the service currently has, whether they have a large Jira like ticketing backlog, the service quality, how often does it pay, how often does it alarm, and what their monitoring like setup is currently like. We're trying to get all that information beforehand. So, talk to you about the exciting stuff. This is some of the major initiatives that we have planned for this year. Pretty aggressive. We're trying to do this across the whole company. So some of our major initiative is that for the services that we currently own, we want to define SLIs and SLOs for those, which is, I'm trying to define SLIs for a service right now, and there's a lot of work that goes into it, surprisingly. You have to talk with stakeholders. Oh, no, that's for SLOs. We need to understand the systems and what the key what the key functions are. You got to define like whether a certain endpoint goes down, or not a certain endpoint. What kind of metrics would indicate like whether a service health is degraded. It gives us a better picture on the level of effort a certain system requires to get it to be at a better operational level. It also helps us not get paid in the middle of the night for a non-actionable like page. You define a proper SLI. If that SLI and SLO, you're not going to get paid on something that you can't do anything about. We're also thinking about CI/CD of infrastructure with Terraform. We want to explore products that makes it better than what we have currently. Currently, we're just using CloudFormation, and I'm not a fan of CloudFormation. I think there's too much magic under the hood. And we need an important thing that was brought up with the Spectre meltdown fiasco was that you need to prove that your code is deployable in your infrastructure. We had issues with like upgrading our solution stacks so we can get that latest kernel patch, but kernel version. But some of our applications weren't deployable on the newer version, and no one knew about that because they weren't regularly rebuilding their infrastructure, updating their infrastructure. So every build and deploy, you should be proving that your infrastructure still works. We're also exploring better deployment strategy, whether that's connect or whatever. We want better monitoring metric collection. We're looking at Prometheus. We want better business value metrics, metrics that actually tell the business that whether certain key aspects of the business is functioning or not. And of course, we want better paging rules on those. And we want to start automating just about everything. We want to eliminate toil, whether that's through utilities or scripts, or whether those utilities can help you better diagnose certain outages. Whether you build a script that would get the JVM dumps from your instance, or reducing oil is important because we're trying to, as we scale the SRE team up, we want to scale it sublinearly to the amount of projects we have. Per projects, we can't, the amount of work can't go up linearly because we don't have enough people for that. Standards that we define have to be easily implementable across different teams. We're looking at that through like common application starters. We have some of that already through Spring Boot starters that are pretty popular across the company. We want to also start developing common Terraform modules, common infrastructure code, common everything. Um, and some of the long-term initiatives we have. These are stuff, part of these stuffs are stuff I want that we probably won't get, but I really want them. We're currently on AWS for everything, so we're still waiting on AWS's fully support Kubernetes, which is probably like a year out, so we'll see. I also want to start doing like chaos testing with Chaos Monkey, like Envoy is an interesting like service. Also, I really like how GitLab looks and how I like how you can define the CI/CD pipeline in code. I think it's really cool. So yeah, thanks for listening. We're always hiring. You can go on the RetailMeNot.com career page. You can always email me at skang@rmn.com. And my manager wanted his email on there too, so you can bother him. Yeah, any questions?
All right, here are the rules for the cube. This is going to be fun. I'm going to hand it to a nerd. I'm a nerd. And you have to throw it to another nerd. And we're going to see how many times it gets dropped and if it actually works after this.
I think I'm launching backwards. So. You said you had an existing DevOps team?
Yes.
Why aren't they doing some of this work?
They're doing some of the work, but the DevOps team is mostly a consultant role. They don't really do the operational task of a lot of like for a lot of teams, and they're pretty adamant on keeping it that way.
So this is a culture. This is a culture issue.
I tend to agree with the way they're operating from talking with a lot of them. Hear a lot of horror stories about different companies where the DevOps team would be in charge of deploying and running these applications. So the application team would just dump all their applications onto them without even checking whether they're deployable or not. And that's been a major headache for a lot of companies. And the fact that like the whole spectrum is the whole responsibility of an application from like building and deploying and running is up to the application team. I think it has worked out pretty well. The SRE team won't be like completely taking over the operational task for all the teams, but we're trying to build out tooling and standards to make it easier for those teams. So it's always going to be like this weird. Again, all my opinions.
You mentioned that as a process to onboard products. Test
Yes.
You must be this tall to SRE. Are these products that have been sort of sunsetted, or they no longer seeing feature development, or no longer seeing velocity, or they still continue to see development iteration? And if so, how do you make sure that as the product team marches changes forward, that SRE team isn't sort of left in the dark of to what, or how does this even?
So it's really mixed. The first set of projects we're onboarding, some of them are more projects that are kind of on like showing its age, it's about the sunset, but like two to three of the projects that we're starting to onboard, they're spanking new services. They're like the best in class. Like that's the some of the newer like they have the newest code, they have the newest infrastructure, they have everything right. Both. Yeah.
Hey, so there it is. All right. Hey, there it is.
There you go.
Check. 1, 2. It sounds like you mentioned like the liaison team would go in and like and sort of be a part of the team and then work on like taking some of their responsibility away. And it sounded like teams would go and like buy into this and pieces. Have you done much of that? Has that gone well, or is it one of those things like from a cultural perspective, our devs like, heck yeah, I'll operate this. I don't want to touch it. Or are they more like, I like owning my CI/CD pipeline, and this is fun for me?
You guys use Team?
We don't. We use Concourse.
Yeah, you guys. Okay, I understand now. So we just formulated this plan. It's not actually implemented anymore yet. We're getting pretty close to we're having heavy debates on whether like how we should do this liaison program, but it's yeah, a lot of things are up in the air. So sorry, what was the question again?
It sounds like you haven't done it yet. So it's just that how has that gone? Like that's a really hard, it's a hard challenge to go and get 150 developer teams to go and say, hey, everybody, you know, you might have somebody on the development team that's developed this whole pipeline, this whole system of releasing and deploying code and testing it and things like that. And then somebody comes in and says, hey, I know how to do this better than you do, and that sort of thing. Like that can be a challenge. I don't know if you ran into that and had any suggestions.
Like luckily, most of our deployment pipeline isn't like, it's usually pretty standard across the board. We all use Team City to deploy to AWS. So like there's nothing like too custom involved with the team. So I don't think we'll have that kind of challenge. I think we'll have challenge on like the individual SRE members trying to balance time between their liaison team and like core SRE work. We're trying to still work out. But just talking with people early on, they seem pretty receptive to it.
It sounds like what you're setting up is sort of a special forces. Somebody's going to parachute in with a certain set of outcomes that need to happen, and then when they leave, they're going to go parachute into another group, and they're going to leave behind a group more effective and more efficient.
Yes.
They have a good understanding on that kind of high level.
Yes, but less action hero.
No cape. Anyone else? Ready?
Like, so you talked about setting up for some old teams. About how much of your time do you spend setting up like a paved path for future development? And how much do you spend like just fixing previous code that's like just gone off the rails? Yeah.
No, that's why we have these lanes. The innovation and so we're hoping for like was it 40 to 50% of our time to be dedicated on these innovation work or innovation and initiative work. We're still debating like what the liaison program, how much time that's going to take up, but it seems like 10 to 30% that's going to be liaison. Then peace out duty work would only be fine when you're on peace out duty. So most of what we're doing is trying to unfuck up stuff later. We don't say
Go. So I have a question about what type of activities do the liaison program do, like in terms of, do you have any idea that there might be in the future specialization that, for example, there's somebody is, parachuted in and they are like backward, forward, then do it where there's somebody who is like a Nexus repo person. I mean, those are things where I find that a lot of developer teams tend to get behind, and if it's just a generic person, it might help, but it would be nice to have somebody who's like a really, that technology.
I don't think we're ever gonna, well, at least in the short-term future, we're gonna have a need for such a specialist. Most of the like innovation work we're doing, we're developing in the mindset that it has to be easily reusable across other teams, and it's like a constant rotation between innovation, PTOT, and these liaison work. So the knowledge will be spread around inside the SRE project, SRE team. We'll learn about all the like standards or initiatives that we're forming. Then individual members will propagate it to other teams. So I don't foresee us like having like super specialists on just Jenkins or something like that.
All right. I think I'm adding this part. You've got the parachute in part kind of figured out. What's your extraction plan? Because you could become the embedded ops person, and they're always going to take up all your time.
That's a very good question, and I don't have an answer to that. I guess when you
could consider something along the lines of you have SLAs with the teams that you selected of like you're part of the application process.
So we're developing like set standards, like criteria where we say, hey, the service is operationalized to X level. Then that's like the baseline level. or you have like good metrics, good monitoring. It's it's auto deployable. Then we have like another set of like criteria where like, oh, that's really well done, and like then there's perfect. So we'll probably stop at like minimal to pretty good. So that's probably the level where we would step off.
Anyone else? All right. Some Kang from RetailMeNot. Thank you very much, sir. That was outstanding.